I was the only woman on the patrol this day, right? And so the men noticed that the sand looked funny where we had to walk. And I was just like, the second we got off the helicopter, I was just like tingling, right? I was like, something's wrong. I don't know what it is. Something's wrong. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, hey, there's no children anywhere, right? Like, we've been to this village a bunch of times. Like, the children run out to the helicopters. Like, they like us. We give them candy. There's no children.
I'm so happy to have you back again for part two. I'm just going to do a little recap. In part one, you just told us about how you were third generation born into the Children of God, which is a cult, and how you were essentially trafficked around the world. And we left off right when you scaled the walls, met this boy, and then integrated into high school somehow. So maybe we can just pick up where we left off.
Yeah. So, so I always say, I dropped into high school, right? Like I go from never having a day of school in my life. We did some homeschooling programs, right? Definitely unschooling, like we were just child labor, that they wanted us to sound good and read and write and all that, but definitely school was not emphasized. Dropped into high school, did 4 years of high school and two. Um, was kind of a very crazy time for me, just not knowing at all. There's a part in the book Uncultured where I'm like on my first or second day, hearing other teenagers having just like a debate and being like, oh, I don't know how to think like that, and I had this realization like, I'm not from another country, I'm from another planet. And so it was just really hard. Like I never, sorry, my Republican dog wants to be challenging. Um, I never, I feel like really integrated during high school, right? I was just so focused. I had to work, so I could have money. I was trying to get through school, trying to understand everything. I, very fortunately had a counselor who who had 1,000 students. There were four counselors in a high school for 4,000 students. And she read an essay about me growing up in a cult, and she decided to help me, and she put me on the path to college. So I go to college. I think kind of at the last time you could put yourself through college, if that makes sense, when costs were still like a bit affordable.
This counselor, you said you wrote an essay about how you're in the cult, and then did you confide in her a little bit more?
Yeah. So, we had to write this essay for English class, right? And it was write your college acceptance essay, but it was an English class, like junior year assignment. So you had to do it even if you weren't going to college. And the prompt was, what makes you different? Whoa, boy. Right. So I wrote an essay that I titled, I Was Raised in a Cult. I actually find this to be an interesting trend with cult survivors. Like, even when we're trying to tell ourselves it wasn't so bad, it was fine, I'm fine, when we need that story, when we need that story to get into college or to compete, like we pull it out. So we know it was extreme. I wrote that story and she just kind of called me in and wanted to talk, wanted to hear more about my life, and was like, why aren't you considering college? Um, and my answer, because I was actually going to go into the Marine Corps right out of high school. And I was like, oh, I want to go to college. I just can't, right? Like I'm indigent in high school. I was on financial aid in high school. Like, how was I ever going to pay for college? Um, and and so she set me on the path, right? She was like, "Oh my gosh, the SATs, study, right? Like there's scholarships." All four counselors in the school worked together to help me get scholarships. I ended up getting like the Houston Rodeo Scholarship and a couple of independent scholarships, and then went to college and like worked for their scholarships and worked. But one of the things I learned is like the hardest thing about going to college is knowing how to get into college. So I was here basically trying to do it on my own. Fortunately, the sister that I was living with had a boyfriend who had been through college, so they were also able to give me some help. Um, and I basically stumbled my way into college where, college was in turn a great time for me. I found out you could get a major in reading books, English. And for a little girl who was never allowed to read, I was like, yeah. Worked very hard, graduated valedictorian, got to go study abroad, got to play for the best chess team in the world. Had, on the one hand, a very beautiful college experience. But on the other,
Did you get a scholarship?
I got like packages. So I got like a big scholarship from the Houston Rodeo, and then I also got like grants from the state of Texas. And then my I didn't get a good enough like SAT score for my college to give me an immediate scholarship, but after a year of like proving my grades, then I got on that. I still worked 1 to 4 jobs, uh, and graduated with student
What did you
loans.
do?
Okay, so I was a nanny. I eventually waited tables at a little shorts restaurant because that paid well. I taught chess, which paid very well. And I babysat, which did not pay that well, but then I made balloon animals because I was, trafficked as a carnival clown in Mexico as a teenager. Um, and you could make like up to $300 an hour making balloon animals. So, teaching chess and making balloon
Wow.
animals helped me pay for college.
Would you attribute being raised in a cult, you just knew how to grind to get it?
Yeah. Um, it makes you a hustler. It makes you a perfectionist, right? Because you've only ever gotten love generally by being perfect. So years later in my journey of breaking down, I would read somewhere that good grades could be a sign of depression, especially for kids who grew up outside their culture. And I was like, oh, like in high school and even in college to a certain extent, I couldn't do anything to make my peers love me. Like I was weird. I was the weird homeschool cult girl, but I could make my teachers love me by being an amazing student. And so that's what I did. And yeah, I've been working since I was 1 years old. And it
Right.
wasn't hard. College didn't seem that hard. The army didn't seem that hard because that had been my whole life.
In your words, you said you felt like alien when you in high school when kids were debating. Did that feeling go away by the point of college?
No, no. What happened in college was in college, I got introduced to the chess team. And my university, University of Texas at Dallas, had the best college chess team in the world. And so they recruited people from all over the world. So I was all of a sudden in a room where almost everybody was from a different country. Like literally only 2 people were from the US. So I found this group where, the way I described it is when nobody's normal, nobody's weird, right? So to them, I'm just Danny. I grew up in Brazil because my parents were missionaries, which was kind of the general story that I had to quickly explain my life. And that's what I'd been told. Um, and and I was in a group of people that I guess didn't find me that weird. And so I got to like kind of like establish a group of friends. Meanwhile, all this wonderful stuff is going on, but then I also fall for, and I believe I'm targeted by definitely the wrong guy. Um,
Why do you think that is?
Why do I think I fell for him?
Well, I think that's very common. I mean, there have been women in my life that always fall for the wrong guy or date the asshole that treats them like
Yeah.
shit. You said I've always been targeted that way.
Um,
Why do you think that is?
I think it's this. This is one of my two pieces of advice I would give to all young people is that when somebody tells you you're so mature for your age, they're targeting you. They're not complimenting you. Right? And we are generally precocious maturity comes from growing up out of order, which generally comes from some kind of trauma. Right? However, like my first boyfriend in college was a 26-year-old PhD student when I was 18, right? And I didn't think anything weird about that because I was so mature for my age, right? But predators know that. And with my eventually ex-husband, in hindsight, I can literally I watch him walk into the biology class and just stand there and scan the room. And, what I say in a future book about this is like maybe he had a sense for like the pretty girls who hated themselves or like I don't know, but I watched him. I watched him scan the room and then pick me and just hone in and then come sit by me. And then spent months love bombing me until I gave in. His name is William Jeffrey Poole, and you can Google how much of a bad guy he is. So there was like some very intense confirmation.
There's
Uh
there's actual receipts online if you Google that name.
yes.
How long did this relationship go on for?
So it started when I was 19, and there was some on again, off again, but it was for most of college. And then right as he graduated, we got married. Um, so I was 21 years old. Um, and this is again one of those things that's hard with the maturity, right? I was like, I've been living outside of my parents' house for 7 years, right? I'm grown. Um, I was not. So we got married. We ended up being married for 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days. However, we probably spent 6 weeks of that time together because as soon as we got married, he joined the military. I went to study abroad in Germany, and then I came back and then I joined the military. It's basically kind of what happened. It was like he went into the military. I went to Germany and had kind of a wonderful time studying and being in a different culture and realized like I was so worried at 21 years old that nobody would love me, nobody would choose me, right? That I married this guy and then limited myself, because now I'm the wife of a soldier. And I thought about like, what does that leave me? I'm going to graduate with an English degree and I'm going to be this dude's wife, trying to be a teacher, probably have some kids. He already wants to be a politician. And I was like, I'm not going to be that girl. My other choice in the book, we call this being forked, which is a chess term where you're forced on like one path and of one path or the other, and they're both not good. And so I was like, well, or I can go into the army too. Um, and I can go do this, and looking back now, it's so funny because like if I had not met Jeff and gone into the army, I would have had a PhD by 25. I did not know how to go just be in the world, right? So it's kind of like in high school, there's a structure. In college, there's a little bit of a structure, but I also think I built my own high control, high demand schedule so that I couldn't think, I couldn't fall apart. And there's someone telling you what to do next. And I wouldn't have known how to go out and get a job as an English, I wouldn't have known how to do any of that. And I was terrified. And the idea of going into the army sounded pretty cool. And I thought I would be good at it. So I did.
Use the expression for, did you almost feel like you did not have a choice? That was your only choice,
Yes.
going to the
And
military?
here's the thing, all along this journey, so much of my grit and my pushing and my umph was trauma, right? Trauma, perfectionism, the need to survive. But I think 10% of it was I was picking up on the misogyny and I wasn't going to have it. So I knew, like, this guy, I was the valedictorian after never having an education, right? And I got off the stage after giving the speech. And what my husband says to me is the other guy's funnier. I just knew that, like, he thinks he's better than me. He wants to control me. He wants me to be in this hierarchy beneath him. And I don't think I want to do that. And, like, to the point that he would remind me that he was always going to outrank me by 6 months, right? Just, just this, this need to be better than me and to control me. And I decided I was not going to be just a teacher and just a military spouse when I could go play the same game that he did.
Wow. So you enlist in Texas. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did this thing. It's called direct commission. I literally walked into a recruiter's office and I said, "Hey, put me in officer school." So if you have there's 3 ways you can become an officer in the military. Well, there's 4. You can go to West Point for the Army. You can go to West Point. You can go to ROTC, right? Regular college, but they're paying for it and you're doing this 4-year program. You can be already enlisted and cross over, or you could do direct commission. Because I had a college degree, they accept me in as an officer candidate. I go to regular basic training with everyone else, and then I go to officer candidate school, which is like a 3-month, very intensive course. And then I'm a second lieutenant. Um, and so that's what I did. 5 months, uh, just at leadership.
Can you tell me a little bit what that is like? You go to the recruiter's office, they put you in, and what was that 5 months like for you?
So, you know, first of all, the first week of basic training is called reception. It is the absolute worst time. That's the same thing they call it in prison, by the way. And this is when they're just like systematically taking you and making you a part of the machine, right? So you're just standing in formations and sitting in waiting rooms and getting your shots and getting your uniforms and getting your ID card and doing tons of push-ups, right? And getting your dog tags. And it is the time where everyone is going, "Oh my gosh, what did I do with my life?"
I imagine they're verbally abusing you and stuff.
Yes, they're already starting, but it's not that bad, you know? They definitely tell you, they're like, "We don't care what your recruiters told you. We own you now." And it is very much this bait and switch, which is what cults do, right? The recruiting process. So you are welcomed in to your first day at the Army, right? Like, you get off this bus in civilian clothes. They've already kept you awake for probably 72 hours, by the way, just traveling, right? And the first thing they say to you is, "We don't care what your recruiter told you. We own you now." And this is an exact cult recruiting process. While you're the prospect, it's all about you and what we can do for you. And the second they have you, it's what you are. And this is why I push back on all the other cult experts that say you knew what you signed up for. No, I don't know that any veteran sort of agrees with that, right? Like, yeah. For example, at no point in your recruiting process does your recruiter say to you, hey, at some point, just for fun, you're going to go to a swamp in Louisiana and live there for 6 weeks while American soldiers dressed up like bad guys try to fake kill you. Nobody tells you about that, right? There's just like any sort of high control group, there's just so much that opens up as soon as you get there. But I'll say I got through the first week of reception, and it wasn't until it's the very first thing of basic training, and it's well known. Um, and you get off the bus, you have these 50-pound duffel bags, and they're just yelling at you to get in a formation and get your bag up over your head. And you proceed to have this 2 or 3 hour event where you're holding 50 pounds over your head and getting yelled at by drill sergeants. And it's very, very important. And this is where I had the direct realization, okay, I just joined another cult.
It wasn't like, I want to go fight for my country. I want to go kill this enemy. It was an internal battle of, this is what I should do to make my life better.
Yeah.
And now you just signed up for another cult experience.
And I would say, like, I wasn't savvy enough for it to be hard for me, because my next thought, right? I was like, oh, I just joined another cult. And my next thought was like, okay, I'm going to be better at it than these suckers, right? And Jake, I just proceeded to buy in, right? I was like, no, I am going to be a super soldier. I told myself this story that like I felt like a debt to America because I was born with a US passport, right? And I was able to come here and pull myself up. And I was like, I'm just going to go be the best at this. And this is what people is so uncomfortable for people about brainwashing, because we buy in to our own indoctrination, right? And like, that's why you can't crack somebody's brainwashing until they're ready.
That makes sense. Also, in my life currently, I always look at the alternative. What's the alternative? So you could have fought back against the recruitment, training, whatever, military, and where would that get you? Probably
They kick you out.
not far,
Yeah.
but but instead you're super soldier time.
So the reason I say this first event is very significant, right? Right? It's a wacky ritual, right? And there's two things about the duffel bag event that are important. It's irrational, right? Like, you've probably never gone outside and held 50 pounds above your head for 2 hours, right? And it's impossible. Nobody can do it. And those are the two things the cults need for an event to push you in, right? And so there is research that shows that once you do one wacky thing for an organization, something that makes no sense, but you're just doing it because they're telling you to, rites of passage, if you will, you're in. Like, you're very unlikely to not do future wacky things. And that's how you get from faith, love, and Jesus to pedophilia for God, right? It's just one thing at a time. And so, what's interesting for me is I'm a cult baby, which is a word that we came up with for our experience, because we don't necessarily relate to the term cult survivor, because there was nothing they could do to make me buy in, right? Like, I was just a little neurodivergent atheist born to religious extremists. But when I chose to buy in, man, I can buy in hard. And To this day, one of my skills is I can convince you and myself of anything. And I have to be very careful of that because I can buy into something very hard. Um, and cults love those people, by the way,
Totally.
right? Because you're the best people that can buy in super hard and are super smart and what the army calls high speed. Like those are the people that you put out front to represent the cult.
Yeah. There's something fascinating you said in part one in this part of how born in baby neurodivergent atheists to extremists. And it just makes me think about the brain and how that is even possible. Because I always think, obviously, we have the ability to come up with ideas and creativity on our own, but if all you know
Right,
from birth
right,
is
right.
X, how can
Yeah,
you possibly figure
right.
out why at such a young
And
age?
there's a
Fascinating.
term for this, by the way. Can we say all the words on here? Is that fine?
Oh,
So,
yes,
so the
please.
term is mind rape. When you take a child and isolate them in only one perspective, that's called mind rape. And that's what they did to us, right? And in the children of God, honestly, they isolated us so much that they're really responsible for everything that we are, like they literally made me in isolation of any other perspective. However, and there's many different trains of thoughts on this, but I don't think that children can be brainwashed. Because of that, you have to buy into it part. You have to, in every cult memoir, you can see where the cult joiner pushes themselves past the red flag, right? Like they rationalize themselves into it. Uh, and you have to be at least 10 to 14-ish to kind of even have that level of rational of ability, right? And this is why almost all cults are extremely controlling and abusive of children because the number one rule for being in a cult is don't ask questions, don't stand out, right? And children don't do that. No matter what they did to me, and they literally tortured me in a number of ways, right? I still asked questions. But as soon as I bought in the army, right? I was like, no, Daniela, you did this. And we actually use the phrase drink the Kool-Aid in the army for like, we know this is stupid, but we're going to do it anyway, right? You just got to drink the Kool-Aid. You just got to buy in. And I also think that most cults at some point realize that they need to break the teenagers, right? And that is why you have the Mormon missions. That is why you have the troubled teen industry. That is why you have the youth group, right? Like all of this focus on like, as soon as they're old enough to buy in, now you got to brainwash them again.
Yep.
And that breaking. So I actually, before I wrote Uncultured, I listened to a book about the troubled teen industry. And Jake, I was connecting to it from both sides of my brain. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like growing up in a cult, but this is also like military training. And that's when I was like, oh yeah, military training is legit brainwashing. Which holds up. I know all the science now.
It seems like unnecessary tactic for something like the military. How could you achieve what the military, any military is trying to achieve without doing that?
I mean, I don't know. I get this question a lot, right? But so the history is the military discovered brainwashing in the late 60s. As we were getting prisoners of war back from Korea, who had learned this from the Chinese, Mao's Great Leap Forward, right? There was this path. And the US military said, mind control, can we use this as a weapon? Right? And so then they hired 4 psychologists who studied abusive relationships and cults, and they built modern day basic training. So, like, and to this day, the military doesn't send their psychologists through basic training. And I find that to be very interesting. Um, and so
That is
I
interesting.
don't know that like we have to brainwash our soldiers, right? Like there have always been militaries before that, and we, in theory, had a more effective military before that. But I also go into this more because the US military, like, if people are like, well, can we be this effective at combat without the brainwash? If your only metric is killing people faster, yeah, you probably want brainwashed people, right? But the US military publicly and internally tries to present itself as a wonderful organization, values, loyalty, leadership, blah, 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 all this stuff, right? We care about our soldiers. We don't know why they're all dying, right? Like, as soon as I realized that the military actually fit every definition of cult, it explained so much to me about soldier issues, right? About why we have so many suicide, all of this different stuff. And I know that we're not going to just dismantle the US military, but I think understanding that this is a cult experience, and we, right now in our country, we just kind of ask 1% of our population to be in this cult, which we know is going to harm them and their families for our protection. And a very good example is the geographic abuse. We move our soldiers around all of the time, exactly so that you do not have military leaders building local fans and followings, right? It hurts people and their families. It hurts the individuals and their families. And we're just asking for that sacrifice for the good of the country. And we're seeing the good right now. There's not a single active duty military base in this country that has one single political leaning. Um, but we don't want to have the conversation about the military's a cult and it is hurting our soldiers, and what are we responsible to do about that?
Am I wrong to think it's necessary?
I mean, I don't know. I think it's the metric. I think they pushed us into a bunch of kind of dirty wars. So it probably was necessary.
Well, I mean, the dirty wars, yeah, that's like fucked up. You look back at, no, like Hussein was a great guy or anything, but
Yeah.
he, did not have nukes. There's,
But
but like,
even Afghanistan,
it just
which is the
feels,
place that I fought, right? Like, I think our whole country kind of bought in on this, like, see, they attacked us. The best thing for a cult leader is an actual attack. I mean, when the assassination attempt happened on Donald Trump during the election, I was like, this is the best thing. This is the best thing that could have happened to him. Because he can be like, see, look at these followers. Castro in Cuba, people have different feelings about him, but the best thing that ever happened for Castro's control was the Bay of Pigs. Because he could be like, see, the US is trying to get us. And I think that because there was a very obvious terrorist attack that killed so many thousands of Americans, we bought in and we didn't question, and I was always questioning some. Like, I questioned the torture, but not why we were there in the first place.
let's get back to your military career. So you did 5 months, like training,
It's training.
and then what?
Then I went to spy school, military intelligence school.
What?
So
Oh my
we are
God.
the Army's spies. It's never as cool as it sounds, but we are the experts on the bad guy. And this was like I only joined the army to be one thing, which was the intelligence officer. I was like, I will be good at this, studying the bad guy, getting outside my own culture, right? Understanding a different way of thinking. I can be good at that. Um,
Is that like CIA or different?
I mean, CIA is a possible career afterward. A lot of times when you hear about intelligence analysts, that's the CIA. Like that show Homeland, that was CIA. But like military intelligence is the military's experts on the bad guys, right? So you have kind of every level of spying that goes on. What I like to tell people is when I took my mom and my youngest sibling to the like International Spy Museum in DC and pointed on the wall to what I did, that was cool. It is the least cool part of the Spy Museum, but there it is. But yeah, so we're the experts on the bad guy, right? So we have to know operations better than the operations because we have to try to break it. And so I go to spy school and then I get sent to the 101st, which is the Band of Brothers division. And I'm like immediately out the door on deployment. And so on the one hand, I spend 5 years in an aviation brigade and I go back and forth to war twice as the intelligence officer. But while I was on my first deployment in 2011, the Army realized they needed to start putting women into combat teams finally on purpose. And so I was also a part of this first, like, very secret at the time experiment of putting women on deliberate ground combat teams.
Why did they have to do that? Was that for uh inclusion?
No, so it was for what was called counterinsurgency operations. So one General David Petraeus, who we call Betrayus, said this is a counterinsurgency. Like what we are fighting here is insurgents fighting the government, right? So what we need to do is win the hearts and minds of the people. And because Afghanistan is a very, very conservative Muslim, Sunni Muslim majority country, there's a lot of rules in where how men can interact with women. And so because of that, like the male soldiers couldn't like search women, for example. So we started to see things like, well, they're gonna put on a burqa and go past your checkpoint, right? Or, dressing up as a pregnant woman or literally strapping a bomb on a pregnant woman and having her get on a helicopter. And so a big part of what we did was like we were on the team to interact with the women and children specifically. It was 18 months deployed total, but I deployed for a year for 365 days when I was 20, 23, 24. And then came back. I think we were home for like 13 months, at which point I got the head job as the head intelligence officer for a battalion of helicopters. And we went back over again. And that time I was just doing my, mostly desk job of intelligence.
Tell me your craziest experience in the military.
So I was on this team, right? On this combat team, and we had an ambush. I was not there, but our team was ambushed and we lost 10 people in one day. And it was horrible hearing it. Like I heard my friend lay down on a bomb on the radio. Um,
You were like listening in on comms
Oh yeah,
from
because it
the
was
office.
it was a long drawn out ambush where people were continually dying. It was a very, very intense situation, of course. And it was also one of those things that you never leaves you when you like you're hearing your friends dying on the radio, but you gotta go back to work. Like you still gotta just do your job. Um, and then this is the same deployment just a few months later. I would say another crazy experience, which was when we got to a village. Everybody's on edge because we've just had this big thing happen. And when I say like the men, I was the only woman on the patrol this day, right? And so the men noticed that the sand looked funny where we had to walk. And I was just like, the second we got off the helicopter, I was just like tingling, right? I was like, something's wrong. I don't know what it is. Something's wrong. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, hey, there's no children anywhere, right? Like we've been to this village a bunch of times. Like the children run out to the helicopters. Like they like us. We give them candy. There's no children. And together we figured out like, hey, there's a bomb in the road ahead where the sand looks funny, right? And gosh, I would say like it was so crazy because the only reason I spoke up was because I had literally been told by my leadership, hey, we know you're new and untrained. That's a benefit. Speak up if you see something funny, right? Um, but also, one of the things that everyone said to me when all of our men on the team that was in the ambush died was, I'm so glad none of you women were out there. And that, has always been the military's concept is like, can women be as good soldiers as men? But what we actually discovered is like, well, when both men and women are trying to kill you, it makes sense to have both men and women on your team. Like what if I had this other day where I probably saved some people's life by my woman's perspective? So why are we assuming that the only thing that would have happened if women were on the team was women would have died? Like, I think we need to hold space for the idea that maybe the whole outcome could have been different.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Uh,
And before we move on, what was aside from meeting your partner, the best experience you had in the military? Like, what was the best thing the military did for you?
um, First of all, I got to be part of the team that secured the airfield when President Obama visited. That actually looked like me getting locked on the airfield for 18 hours on my birthday with no food, but it was cool. And then I got to actually later go to the White House and meet President Obama, and I got an award from the president. Um, and that was very, very cool. And
Wow, what award?
it's just called the Presidential Volunteer Award. It's not an exceptionally cool award. But you know, it was pretty cool. And then I would just say, like, I liked being a soldier. It was all cool in a lot of ways. It was very fun. It was very badass, all of the things. I was good at intelligence. And so I actually really enjoyed the military, but being in a system not made for me was very toxic for me. Um, and it also triggered a lot of my trauma. So it's just all of it.
Yeah, I can imagine. How did you end your military career?
Well, I mean, it sort of crashed and burned a little bit. It's it's the whole sort of ending of the book. Maybe flew a little too close to the sun. I think was under a cultic boss that I pissed off, and things happened, and it just kind of all fell apart very quickly. And I ended up with a very interesting parallel to getting out of the cult, where like I was being punished by the military. In this case, it was for something I absolutely did not do, but you know, I was being punished by them, and your options are you can leave or you can recommit, give us more time, work harder. You know, that job that I did for 3 years as the senior intelligence officer for a battalion that was constantly training and deploying was just not going to count at all. I was going to have to repeat the last 3 years of my life just to get a promotion. Um, and I was like, you know what? No. Um, I there's also a little bit of glass cliff in there. Like I was just tired as a woman, I was tired. You know, I was an important part of eventually taking the combat band down. And like when I was young, I thought I wanted to be one of the first women to go to Ranger school. But by the time they were sending women, I was at war watching the first women graduate. And by the time they offered it to me, I was almost 28. I was tired, you know, it was so hard to just have to prove yourself every day and to just have to be better than your peers all the time because you're in a system that's not made for you.
I don't even know how it works. Did you quit? Did you get kicked out?
Um,
How
I did
what
not, I did
happens?
not get kicked out. So I was serving under kind of an open contract. Like as the way I went in as an officer, I only owed them 3 years and then I could get out. I stayed for 6.5. So I was, just serving openly. And I mean, a big part of it was just like the system kept lying to me. They keep saying, like, hey, you give us your labor, you go to, they would literally tell us as lieutenants, they would be like, you go deploy, like, you go do something hard for the army, and then the army will take care of you. And I was in the 101st and I deployed twice. And then they basically told me to go F myself, And so I was like, no, I'm done. I'm not giving you, if I say yes, I'll stay in the army, they'll move me. I now owe them more time, and like I was like, I gave you 6.5 years to prove to me that this was for me and you didn't. So I got out. Like it's honorable. And it gave me some interesting parallels to write about.
So you got out, and where were you working out of when you got out?
So I got out. My husband was still in. He was a special operations pilot at that time. And so I went to work for Microsoft, actually. I did what so many veterans do. I like tried corporate America and it was terrible. And I was having a baby and I didn't do that well. Got sort of quiet fired. And that started me on my journey of saying, you know what? I have this big story. I think I should do something with it. Um, right around that time, a cult leader got elected to take over the country. And I decided to start writing books about it. Ended up going on a veteran program, going back to Harvard and getting a master's in organizational psychology and getting this book deal. And now I've just written my second book, The Culting of America, which is about to come out, which is like my big research book. And I woke up one day and I was like, hey, I think I'm an expert on cults and extreme groups and extremely bad leadership. And it was funny because I was actually getting ready to start researching culting of America. And I said, my life has been fascinating and I'm about to start a very interesting research project. And I wonder if people want to know. And that's kind of when my brand, which is called Knitting Cult Lady, was born. And I now hope to be your most famous expert on bad guys that also makes fabulous outfits while like knitting together concepts. Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
I feel incredibly well placed. Like my life story has made me well placed to understand what's going on right now in our country. Um, and it's been both interesting and frustrating to be like, hey, I escaped a cult and then watch my country like really quickly go down this very intense path. So anyway, I think both of my books help people understand what's happening in the world right now too. So
Uncultured is out right now. You should check that out. And then Culting of America is available on pre-sale.
yes,
Definitely check that out. And I just want to thank you for sharing the story in its entirety, your story, and putting yourself out there. I mean, it's really remarkable what a single human can go through. I think we both
we
have
both know.
wildly different perspectives, or experiences and perspectives. Um, I guess my final question for you before we sign off is, when you look back at your life from day one to now, are you happy that you were able to experience all this? If you could take it back and have a different life, would you?
Okay, so I am 38. I think that deconstructing a worldview takes a decade, and I'm now on the outside of that. And there is a quote that means a lot to me that says, "We know we're healing when we start wishing for a do-over. Stop wishing for a do-over." And about 5 years ago, I heard that and I was like, I hope I get there, but right now, no, right? Like I would trade it all for a childhood, right? I would trade it all for not having the pain, but now I get it and I wouldn't change it. And like when people ask me if you could go back, would you join the army? Would you not join the army? I'm like, it's too binary, right? Triggered all of my trauma, but also most of the good things in my life right now come from that. And it would just be a totally different life. And like I now, even though the country is in a very weird place, like I have built a beautiful life and I have a partner who gets me and a wonderful, amazing child who is like the do-over baby. You know, she's getting to grow up with freedom and information and books. And, you know, I wouldn't change it because it wouldn't. I hate the whole I wouldn't be who I am today because I think that's too flippant, but like very deeply, I think once you deconstruct all of your stories are your stories, right? And all of my skills are my skills. And like, yes, I was trafficked as a carnival clown in Mexico, but I made balloon animals for my kindergarten's graduation and she loved it. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I can relate. And there's some peace, I think, with
Yeah,
that.
there is. And you know, not for nothing, as I'm sure you connect to, like, I took my pain and all of the worst things that happened to me and the things I didn't get to choose. Like, this is me at 2 being trafficked in Japan. But like, I've made about $1 million from that photo. You know, like I own it now. And also, I have met and heard from other people who have been helped by my story and my pain. And that's really, I like to say, like both sides of owning your story, you know, like I get to make money off of it now, but also I don't feel alone anymore. I feel like I'm part of this process of people who go through unimaginable things and then turn around and like help write the guides for other people who might be going through something else. And that's been beautiful.
Absolutely. You gotta help yourself before you can help others.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. And I want to thank you again for being here. And it means a lot.
Thank you so much, Jake. Thank you so much.